They washed the prisoner. They perfumed him. They dressed him like a god. Then they told him the exact day he would die. He was not dragged to the temple. He walked there. And that may be the most unsettling part of all, because the captives who were not turned into gods were handed something even crueler, a weapon made to fail. How do you make a human being stop thinking like prey? How do you persuade a prisoner to climb the stairs himself? And why did one famous captive reject freedom just to die in front of a crowd? To answer that, we have to begin far from the temple, on a field where men came to battle, knowing the worst thing that could happen was not death. A Tlaxcalan fighter braces for impact. Across from him, the Aztec line does something strange. They do not rush to kill. They close, hesitate, hook, grab. Hands go for wrists, shoulders, throats. A club cracks against bone, but not to finish him. Just enough to drop him, just enough to keep him breathing. Because in this world, a corpse is wasted status. A living captive is currency, a promotion, a badge, an offering. And that single fact changes the entire feel of battle. What terrifies you more, an enemy trying to kill you, or one trying very carefully not to? Aztec warfare was not one simple thing, and historians still debate how much all campaigns were driven by sacrifice. But the ritualized flower wars were explicitly tied to taking captives, and status inside the military rose through seizure, not slaughter. In some conflicts, killing happened in huge numbers. In others, especially staged ritual combat, capture was the point. That meant skill looked different. Warriors closed in, they isolated, they injured without ending the fight. Every movement said the same thing: you are worth more alive than dead. Think about what that does to your mind, not mercy, inventory. Before the temple ever touched a prisoner, the psychology had already begun. Now imagine the walk back, not minutes, days, sometimes longer. Hands bound, wound throbbing, dust in the mouth, and all the while the captive has time to understand the real disaster. He has not been defeated by one man. He has been absorbed into a system. Ahead lies Tenochtitlan, rising from the lake like something unreal. White causeways, canoes, markets, towers, and at the center, the great temple, visible from almost everywhere, lifting over the city like a threat made from stone. Everyone knew what happened there. The prisoner knew it too. He just did not know which version was waiting for him, and that uncertainty was part of the punishment. Some captives were processed quickly. Large ceremonies needed numbers, and numbers needed bodies. At the dedication of the rebuilt Temple Maya in 1487, later sources gave colossal figures, though modern historians dispute them sharply. A more cautious mainstream estimate is far lower, in the thousands rather than tens of thousands. But whatever the exact total, the point is not in doubt. Sacrifice at scale was real, public, and politically useful. The temple became a stage where blood announced power, but mass killing was only the visible edge of the machine. The darker part was what happened when the priest decided a captive was too valuable to kill immediately. Some men were inspected, cleaned, and set apart, not because they had been spared, because they had been selected. A different face, better symmetry, stronger posture, calm under pressure. Something about them suggested they could carry a role, and once chosen, they began to disappear without actually leaving the city. Their own name was taken first. Their old identity followed it. Their hair was cut. Their skin was washed. Their body was prepared for a transformation that, in Aztec thought, was not costume play. It was sacred embodiment. You were no longer a prisoner dressed up for a ceremony. You were the living image of a god. And if an entire city treats you that way for months, what survives of the man you used to be? The best documented version involved the deity Tezcatlipoca. The chosen captive lived under priestly supervision for nearly a year. He moved through the city with attendants. He played the flute. He wore ornaments. He inhaled flowers and incense. People greeted him with reverence. In the final period, he was given 4 women representing divine companions. He was elevated, displayed, attended, and watched. Not watched because escape seemed likely. Tenochtitlan was an island capital linked by controlled causeways. He was watched because the ritual required something more difficult than restraint. It required performance without collapse, not survival, composure. And there is nothing more psychologically violent than being rewarded for cooperating with your own ending. This is where the story stops being simple cruelty and becomes something colder. The priests did not just manage bodies, they managed identity. Every greeting, every ornament, every offering from kneeling strangers told the captive the same lie. Until it started to feel like atmosphere instead of deception. You are no longer merely a man. You are sacred now. You are central. You are seen. Human beings break in many ways, not only through pain, through role, through repetition, through isolation wrapped in privilege. A cell can be made of gold, and when the entire city helps construct it, where exactly do you run? But the countdown never vanished. That is what makes the whole thing unbearable. The captive knew the festival calendar. The city knew it. The priest knew he knew it. Every day of music came with an expiration date. Every flower handed to him was also a reminder. Every bow from the crowd said, "Not yet." Then the final journey came. He sailed with an entourage. He spent his last days in ritual celebration. He returned. He approached the temple. And on the climb, according to the accounts, he broke his flutes one by one as he went up the steps. Why break them? Scholars disagree. Closure? Symbolism? A severing of role? We cannot know for certain. But visually, psychologically, it is devastating. Music ending in fragments. The city had spent months teaching him how to be divine. Now it was teaching the crowd how divinity dies. At the top, the pace changes. Slow ceremony becomes sudden force. Hand sees, body turns. Stone receives, blade descends. For the crowd below, this is religion. It is statecraft, it is spectacle. For the man on the slab, it is the final moment in a process that started the instant he was captured alive. So here is the answer to our first mystery. They did not simply force captives to die. They built an environment where resistance had already been hollowed out long before the knife appeared. But that was not the worst fate available. Not even close. Because some captives were given a public chance that was no chance at all. A rope at the waist. Enough length to move. Not enough to leave. A club placed in the prisoner's hand. From a distance it looks lethal. Up close, the obsidian blades are gone. Feathers have taken their place. It is not a weapon. It is a joke told in front of thousands. And then the real warriors step forward. What would you feel in that moment? Rage, humiliation, or the first numb acceptance that this entire event was designed so everyone could watch you fail? This was the gladiatorial sacrifice associated with the festival of Tezcatlipoca, the flaying of men, linked to ixiptla. Elite eagle and jaguar warriors took turns against the tethered captive. He fought exhausted while they rotated in fresh. He swung feathers at obsidian, yet the cruelty had another function. If the captive resisted bravely, the ritual improved. A formidable enemy made the captor look formidable. The empire did not need weak victims. It needed impressive victims who could be defeated in public. That way terror and prestige rose together. That is important. The system wanted courage. It just wanted courage inside a cage. And once you understand that, the entire empire starts to look different. One story survives because it feels almost impossible. A famous Tlaxcalan captive, later remembered as Tlahuichelei, was said to be offered release or even rank depending on the source, and he refused. Accounts differ in detail, which matters. We should be careful. But the core tradition is powerful. A captured war leader choosing the stone instead of mercy. Why? Honor? Shame? A refusal to live under another ruler? Maybe returning home after capture felt worse than death. Maybe accepting favor from the enemy felt like a second defeat. Maybe he understood that one thing still belonged to him, the manner of his ending. Sometimes the last form of control the human being can seize is choosing how the crowd will remember him. So he fought, not to win. That was impossible. He fought to refuse the script. Every cut he landed, every second he remained standing, forced the audience to see not a victim, but a will that would not flatten on command. And that is why this story endured, because the empire built these rituals to prove the captive was trapped inside its design. But a man who kept fighting exposed something dangerous. The design still needed him. Without the captive, there is no spectacle. Without spectacle, there is less fear. Without fear, the city looks less like destiny and more like power pretending to be inevitable. So why was the entire system built this way in the first place? Because sacrifice did more than feed belief. It organized society. Military rank depended on taking captives. Priestly authority depended on ceremonies. Political intimidation depended on foreign eyes witnessing what happened to those taken alive. The rituals told subjects, rivals, and tributary cities the same message in different languages: resist us, and we will turn your strongest people into examples. This is why the ceremonies were public. This is why they were elaborate. This is why simple killing was not enough. A quick death ends fear too soon. A process lingers. A process travels. A process gets retold in neighboring cities until people obey before battle even begins. In other words, these were not isolated horrors, they were infrastructure. And that brings us to the empire's fatal weakness. It needed enemies, real ones, permanent ones. If every rival state were fully crushed, where would the captives come from? How would warriors rise? How would priests stage proof that the gods still favored the regime? The machine required a controlled supply of outsiders who could be fought, seized, displayed, and sacrificed. That made neighboring states more than enemies. They were inputs. The system could dominate them, punish them, threaten them, but it could not erase them without starving itself. And any empire dependent on a renewable enemy is already balancing on a crack. Some scholars caution against reducing all Aztec warfare to sacrifice alone, and that caution matters. Empires also fought for tribute, prestige, political leverage, and survival. But even where practical motives existed, religion and war were deeply fused. In ritualized conflicts especially, taking captives for sacrifice was not a side effect. It was one of the reasons the conflict existed at all. That fusion, spiritual, military, political, is what made the system so durable and so terrifying. And it is also why the arrival of the Spanish became catastrophic so quickly. When the conquistadors entered the Valley of Mexico, they were not simply facing one empire. They were stepping into a network of grudges. Cities that had watched their sons taken alive. Families that knew what the temple meant. Allies who had endured the pressure of living beside a power that needed them unconquered but never secure. So no, the Spanish did not topple Tenochtitlan by themselves. They found partners, especially Tlaxcalans, who had every reason to help destroy a system that had consumed generations of their people. This is the twist. The machine looked unstoppable, but its appetite had created its own coalition. What happens when an empire teaches its enemies that surrender is not safer than resistance? Eventually, they stop fearing annihilation more than they hate the future you are offering. Spanish eyewitnesses described temple precincts slick with blood and skull displays so vast they seemed unreal. Archaeology has confirmed that the Great Ixiptla was no myth. Excavations near Templo Mayor uncovered hundreds of skulls in a tower and thousands of fragments, evidence of a display system on a scale that stunned even conquerors accustomed to violence. The find also complicated older assumptions by including women and children among the remains. The message here is bigger than one gruesome detail. Once power turns public death into architecture, fear stops being an event. It becomes part of the skyline. And that is what the captive entering Tenochtitlan was really seeing, not just a city, but a worldview built in stone. So let us resolve the deeper mystery. Why make a god only to kill him? Because the ritual did something raw power alone could not do. It transformed domination into consent theater. It showed the crowd a victim who appeared to participate. It told the empire that the cosmos itself accepted the arrangement. It turned coercion into ceremony and ceremony into legitimacy. The captive's body was not enough. The state wanted his posture, his timing, his walk, his composure. It wanted not only obedience, but a performance of meaning. And if that idea feels disturbingly modern, it should. How often do systems still demand that people smile inside roles they did not choose? Look past the obsidian and feathers for a second. This story is not only about the Aztecs. It is about what organized power learns very quickly. Fear works, but fear wrapped in ritual works better. People accept almost anything if it arrives dressed as duty, honor, destiny, tradition, or necessity. That is why this history lingers under the skin. Not because it is alien, because it is recognizable. The methods are ancient. The logic is not. And the most dangerous systems are often the ones that convince human beings to help perform their own submission. Picture the captive one last time. The city silent, flowers hanging from his wrists, broken flute pieces behind him on the steps, thousands below, priests above, no path sideways, only upward. He has been praised, renamed, adorned, and studied. Every exit has been closed except one, becoming the role they built around him. So he climbs, not because the blade is merciful, not because he has forgotten, but because the Empire spent months narrowing reality until the final staircase felt like the only shape left. That is the real horror, not the kill, the preparation, and the men on the circular stone. Their terror was different. No months of perfume, no reverence, no illusion of divinity, only immediate recognition. The rope on the waist, the fake weapon in the hand, the crowd waiting for drama. If the chosen god was psychologically dismantled through elevation, the gladiator was crushed through exposure. One was told he was sacred, the other was shown he was expendable. Different ritual, same destination. One was worshipped into death, the other was mocked into it. Which fate is worse? The lie that comforts you, or the humiliation that arrives without disguise? Here is the aftermath most summaries skip. When Tenochtitlan fell in 1521, the rituals did not vanish because history became civilized overnight. They vanished because the political, military, and religious framework supporting them was smashed and replaced by another violent order. The old machine broke, a new one arrived. That does not make the earlier system less brutal. It makes the world of conquest even darker. Human beings did not move from cruelty to kindness. They moved from one structure of power to another, which means the safest lesson here is not moral superiority, it is caution. If the historian fact is your kind of history, the kind that does not soften the edges, subscribe now, like the video, and stay with us. Because the past is never just about what happened. It is about what people can be taught to normalize, what states can persuade crowds to cheer, and how easily ritual can hide violence in plain sight. So when people reduce this entire story to the Aztecs were savage, they missed the most important truth. Savagery was not the system. Organization was. Calendars, ranks, costumes, processions, audience placement, public memory. That is what made it powerful. That is what made it scalable. And that is why it still grips us now. Because deep down we know the most frightening forms of violence are rarely chaotic. They are managed, scheduled, given a script. And once a civilization learns how to make horror feel normal, how long before the people inside it stop seeing it at all? A prisoner is captured, he is sorted. One man is turned into a god, another is tied to a stone. Both are told, in different ways, that their body now belongs to a story larger than themselves. That is what really happened to many captives in the Aztec world. Not a single act of killing. A sequence, a transformation, a public lesson. And maybe that is why this subject refuses to die. Because the final image is not the knife. It is the staircase. And the unbearable question it leaves behind. If a crowd worships you on the way to your death, is that reverence or the last stage of control?